Imagine waking up at dawn to the roar of engines tearing through land your family has tended for nearly a century. That morning, golden stalks of heirloom corn, survivors of generations of hardship, were crushed as if they were nothing more than weeds beneath steel tracks. And all because the president of the nearby HOA decided my farm was the perfect spot for her community's overflow parking. No courtesy call, no purchase offer, not even a warning, just pure entitlement wrapped in suburban arrogance. My name is Jeb Thornfield, and last April, my peaceful life imploded in the span of a few minutes. I dropped my coffee when I saw the bulldozers demolishing a season's worth of crop, about $47,000 worth, while diesel fumes choked the cool morning air. But the woman behind this mess had overlooked something critical, a buried clause in her own HOA's development agreement, a clause worth over $3 million. It would become the weapon that turned the entire situation back on her. She didn't know it yet. 6 months later, I let her cut the ribbon on her precious parking lot, all smiles and champagne. And then I dropped the hammer that ruined her plans, bankrupted her HOA, and sent her straight into federal custody. My story doesn't start with her, though. It begins 3 generations back, when my grandfather Ezra cleared 47 acres of Missouri bottomland by hand, using little more than stubbornness and a mule. He planted heritage corn that survived every challenge the world threw at it. Droughts, floods, recessions, you name it. When he passed on, the land went to my father, and when he died 15 years ago, it became my responsibility. Our farm sits between an old country road and what used to be another family's property, until they sold to big city developers who built Willowbrook Estates, a sprawling neighborhood of oversized homes governed by an HOA that seemed to enjoy enforcing rules more than building a community. My daily routine never changed. Walk the gravel drive at sunrise, breathe in the smell of earth and brewing coffee, lay a hand on the old fence posts Ezra hammered into place during the war. The whisper of cornstalks in the morning breeze always felt like a reminder that this land belonged to my family, long before any HOA board came along. My wife Martha used to say the same. She passed away from cancer a year and a half before all this, leaving me to run the farm alone. My kids moved away for work, which I respected, but it meant I faced the silence of every morning by myself. Life became more complicated as soon as Willowbrook was built. Along with their manicured sidewalks and matching mailboxes came an endless stream of rules, complaints, and rising taxes. My farmland's tax bill tripled in 5 years, city-level taxes on rural property. That's when Cordelia Ashworth Petton arrived on the scene, the newly minted HOA president who acted like the entire county belonged to her. Coming from some polished suburb back east, she brought every bit of that attitude with her. She drove a spotless white BMW, dressed like she was on her way to a yacht club that didn't exist here, and seemed determined to bring city expectations into a rural community. First came noise complaints about my rooster, then accusations that my old tractor, which had sat in the same spot for decades, was an eyesore damaging their property values. She even hired someone to photograph my barn equipment as if she were building a criminal case. When that didn't work, she organized petitions to get my land rezoned, claiming farm machinery created safety hazards for her neighborhood's residents. She ran her HOA like a political campaign, complete with spreadsheets and color-coded documents about every minor thing she thought she could use against me. The real blow came when I was at Martha's memorial service. 300 people gathered to honor the kindest woman I've ever known, while Cordelia was standing in front of the county planning board giving a presentation about how my unused frontage should be converted into additional parking for Willowbrook. She called it underutilized buffer land. She conveniently forgot the parts where that buffer land fed families for generations. She even hired a private survey to claim 200 feet of my field weren't actually mine. It was the kind of lie so shameless that you wonder if the person telling it even understands what truth means. I returned from the memorial to find bright orange stakes stabbing through my crops, a neat straight line slicing into my heritage corn like wounds. A certified letter sat in my mailbox claiming that her professional survey determined I had been trespassing on HOA property. Trespassing. On land my grandfather cleared with his bare hands. I headed straight to the courthouse and pulled the original deed myself. Every boundary marker was clear as day. Those stakes were deep in my property. Armed with official documents, I marched up to her door. It looked like a magazine cover, bushes trimmed to geometric precision, a lawn smoother than a golf course, and a doormat that smugly read "Blessed." She answered in tennis whites, even though she had never touched a racket in her life. I spread the county records across her granite counter and told her plainly that every stake was on my land. Any reasonable person would have backed off, not Cordelia. She condescended, said old documents were confusing, implied my grief was clouding my judgment, and threatened years of litigation unless I accepted her version of reality. She patted my shoulder like I was a child. She wanted a war. She got one. I contacted a local journalist, Marcus Webb, who ran a story titled "Suburban Bully Targets Grieving Farmer." The county rallied behind me. Hundreds of comments poured in. People shared stories about my farm, about Martha, about the good we'd done. But instead of backing down, Cordelia doubled down with legal filings, forcing me to hire an attorney and watch my savings evaporate on fees. And while we fought over the boundary, she made a bigger play, one I didn't see coming. 3 weeks later, I got a call from my lawyer saying Cordelia had filed an emergency petition to rezone my farm residential, claiming it violated their neighborhood's character. At the hearing, she brought a battalion of HOA residents dressed like they were headed to court. She held up pictures of my old tractor like it was a crime scene. She distributed glossy packets claiming my farm lowered property values and created traffic risks. Then came the real blow. If rezoned, my taxes would jump from under $3,000 a year to over $11,000. Worse, the county would demand nearly $50,000 in back taxes immediately. It was financial assassination disguised as zoning reform. If she succeeded, I'd be forced to sell the farm. But I wasn't alone. The community rallied, restaurant owners, teachers, even the elderly librarian Delilah Brewster, who marched up like a woman on a mission and delivered a speech so fiery it went viral across 3 counties. She called out Willowbrook's hypocrisy, reminded the room that farms fed families long before HOAs existed, and got applause so thunderous that Cordelia couldn't hide her panic. The battle dragged on for months, legal fees mounting, stress piling up, and Cordelia's tactics getting dirtier. She filed for environmental studies claiming my organic methods were damaging her community. She weaponized paperwork like a politician with nothing to lose. Then came her boldest and most illegal move. She filed for an emergency access road permit that cut a 40-foot swath through my fields. The application was pushed through during the holidays, when half the county staff was out. I woke one morning to the sound of heavy machinery tearing into my land without a single legitimate signature approving it. The foreman apologized, saying the permit looked official. But something was clearly wrong. The signatures were from people on vacation, the parcel number was incorrect, and the justification was baseless. I called the county, recorded everything, and contacted an investigative news crew. They captured footage of my heritage crops being destroyed for a road nobody needed. The story hit the evening news with a headline that made me smile through the anger. The county issued a stop work order within hours. The next days were chaos. Public outrage, political pressure, social media storms, all against Cordelia. And then came the turning point. While searching old records for our boundary dispute, I met Harold Puckett, a county clerk who'd been working there since before computers. He showed me the original development agreement for Willowbrook. Hidden in the legalese was a clause requiring a 200-foot agricultural buffer between the development and existing farms. Violating it triggered automatic penalties of over $2 million plus restoration costs. Cordelia had violated this clause dozens of times. But that wasn't all. Harold revealed the HOA was drowning in debt, nearly $2 million, caused by her excessive spending on luxury amenities. And then the final blow. Documents showing she was negotiating to sell the agricultural buffer for a commercial shopping center deal worth millions. She needed my land destroyed to close that deal. She was using her HOA like a piggy bank. We formed a small alliance. Harold, Mrs. Brewster, Marcus, my attorney, and several farmers. We built an airtight case. Every violation documented. Every illegal permit recorded. We even set up trail cameras to capture trespassing and destruction. We prepared to trigger the buffer clause at the exact moment it would hurt her most, right when her commercial contract depended on clear land. But Cordelia didn't stop. She escalated into sabotage, surveillance, anonymous threats, vandalism, even poisoning my tractor's fuel tank with sugar. When her husband visited at night offering a lowball offer for my entire farm and making veiled threats about accidents, he didn't know I was recording the whole thing legally. That recording alone was enough to end his legal career. As Cordelia ran out of time, she became reckless. Running crews at night, forging documents, spreading rumors about my mental state, even cutting down the centuries-old oak tree where I'd proposed to Martha. That was the last straw. It was also a federal environmental violation. We had everything we needed. Federal investigators were already circling because of the environmental damage, forged signatures, and fraudulent permits we had documented. Cordelia was unraveling, holding midnight HOA board meetings where she pushed altered financial statements and fake development agreements she claimed were approved by the county. She underestimated one man in that room, Derek Hutchinson, a retired accountant who had started noticing irregularities months earlier. He recorded everything: her forged signatures, manipulated accounts, and the revelation that she'd already pocketed $500,000 from the commercial developer behind her secret land deal. It was the nail in her coffin. Within hours, all of Derek's evidence landed in my attorney's hands, then with county officials, then federal agents. At the same time, environmental investigators discovered the last act of destruction, the felling of Martha's oak tree, protected under federal law. Cordelia had crossed every possible line, and the noose she'd woven for herself was finally tightening. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. My press conference was scheduled for a Saturday morning, the same day Cordelia planned her emergency HOA vote to finalize the land sale, and just hours before federal agents were due to execute warrants. Marcus Webb published his exposé that morning, a blistering front-page spread laying out the financial fraud, the secret developer payments, the environmental crimes, and the harassment campaign against my farm. By sunrise, that newspaper was in every driveway in Willowbrook. When I stepped onto the courthouse steps at 10, hundreds of people were gathered: farmers, small business owners, teachers, families from Willowbrook, who now understood exactly how badly they'd been deceived. News cameras lined the sidewalk. People held signs supporting the farm. The air felt electric. I told the crowd what had happened from start to finish, but calmly. No theatrics, no shouting. I walked them through the forged surveys, the rezoning trap, the illegal construction, the false allegations, the acts of sabotage, and then the discovery of the agricultural buffer clause. Finally, I raised the legal documents we had prepared and announced that I was filing for the full $3.1 million in penalties. Penalties that legally came before every other HOA debt and could not be erased through bankruptcy. Those words hit like a thunderclap. People cheered, some cried. And then the scene shifted. A convoy of federal vehicles pulled up to the courthouse. Reporters spun their cameras. EPA agents stepped out with warrants in hand, announcing publicly that every construction project at Willowbrook was ordered to stop immediately. They confirmed an active investigation into environmental crimes, fraud, forged permits, and racketeering. The crowd erupted in shock and applause. But the day wasn't done. That afternoon, the Willowbrook clubhouse overflowed with furious residents for the emergency HOA meeting Cordelia had called. She entered wearing dark sunglasses, flanked by lawyers who looked as tense as she did. She tried to take control of the room, claiming everything reported was a smear campaign. But the residents weren't buying it anymore. Derek stood and confronted her with the real financial records, the actual debt, the hidden transfers, the tripled homeowner fees that were used to finance her war against my farm, and the secret $500,000 payment she had personally received. People gasped. Some shouted. Others demanded resignations. Then Harold walked in carrying a box of official county documents. He presented the original agricultural buffer clause and explained in simple terms how badly she had violated it, and how much money the HOA now owed because of her decisions. Panic spread through the room. That's when Sheriff Coleman stepped inside with federal agents behind him. They read her the federal charges: environmental destruction, permit fraud, conspiracy, intimidation, and racketeering. Cordelia tried to protest, but the agents turned her around and handcuffed her as cameras flashed. Her sunglasses fell to the floor, and someone in the crowd clapped before the entire room followed. Her husband David was arrested moments later for witness tampering, fraud, and professional misconduct. Residents stood stunned as both were escorted out. The meeting dissolved into chaos, but in the best possible way. People demanded new leadership, audits, grassroots transparency. Derek stepped forward and offered to help rebuild. What followed was a long cleanup process, but real and meaningful. Cordelia received a federal prison sentence of 18 months, along with over $2 million in restitution. Money she will be paying back for the rest of her life. David lost his law license permanently and received his own prison term. The commercial developer behind the scheme faced millions in environmental fines and ultimately collapsed under the weight of the scandal. Derek was appointed interim president of a reorganized HOA. He implemented open-door policies, lowered fees, and restored trust. Property values stabilized once residents saw transparency instead of corruption. The agricultural buffer violation settlement paid for something beautiful: a scholarship fund in Martha's name, awarding $50,000 a year to students from farming families who needed help pursuing agricultural and environmental studies. Federal oversight ensured the destroyed buffer area was restored properly. Volunteers helped replant trees, restore wetlands, and reseed heritage crops. The community that once felt divided slowly grew together in a way Martha always believed was possible. We planted a new oak tree to replace the one Cordelia destroyed. At the dedication ceremony, hundreds showed up: farmers, neighbors, teachers, families from Willowbrook, people from across the county who'd followed the story. The plaque reads, "In memory of Martha Thornfield, whose kindness nourished this land and its people." The story spread much further than our county. It inspired agricultural groups across the Midwest. Environmental law classes studied our case. Farmers learned how to defend themselves from predatory developments. Marcus wrote a book. Harold received long overdue recognition. Mrs. Brewster became something of a local hero and even published her own guide to fighting civic corruption. Our farm recovered. Partnerships with local restaurants grew stronger. Heritage corn from our land became known across the region. Visitors came to learn about sustainable farming and environmental restoration. And Willowbrook, once the symbol of suburban overreach, became an example of how communities could heal and start fresh. I testified before national agricultural committees. I spoke at conferences. I helped farmers in other states understand their rights. And every time I walked my fields at sunrise, I felt the quiet peace that Martha used to talk about, a reminder that land remembers those who honor it. The Harvest Festival we now host with Willowbrook families is living proof that development and farming don't have to be enemies. They can exist side by side when people choose respect over power, cooperation over control. Looking back on everything, the biggest lessons were simple. Document everything. Know your rights, never fight alone, and remember that community strength can defeat even the most entrenched corruption. Bullies may have money and connections, but truth and persistence leave a paper trail they can't escape. Now when the sun rises over our rebuilt fields and the young oak tree we planted for Martha, I'm reminded that some battles are worth fighting, not just for yourself, but for the generations who will inherit what you protect. And if you think this story was wild, wait until you hear what happened when a crooked city councilman tried to steal my neighbor's lakeside property using bogus eminent domain claims. Let's just say it involved underwater cameras, a forged environmental report, and a courtroom twist no one saw coming. But that's for another day.